Hello and welcome to the third and final showcase for Climate Solutions event. I hope that some of you have joined us for previous events. They're all recorded and you're welcome to watch them now if you weren't there, but really happy that you're here today for the third and final free online showcase. I'm really glad that you're here. I'm Annie Burke. I'm the Executive Director of Together Bay Area. And that's one part of who I am. There are many other parts. Some of the other things I'd love for you to know about me is that I am a big fan of Pescadero State Beach. You can tell me in the chat if you've been there or know that place. I also love eating Vietnamese food in San Jose. Are there any other Vietnamese food eaters here in the group? And I also really love the story about healing that's happening up at the top of Mount Umunhum. That's a really special place to me and to so many other people. And I think that there's a lot to be excited about there. I also am somebody who loves to find the peak of Mount Hamilton when you're on an airplane flying into either Oakland or San Francisco airports. And those are just some of the things that I really love about the South Bay here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I really love that this place is home, and I'm going to guess that you do too. So as we start our final showcase of climate solutions, I invite you to take a breath and arrive here. And in the chat, for those of you who are watching this live today, share your name, where you're zooming in from, and something that you really love about the South Bay or about the Bay Area generally. And let's all get grounded here together in this virtual space together. So wherever you are, everywhere we are, the land we're on is Indigenous land. These lands have been stewarded for thousands of years, and Together Bay Area and our members are actively working in a lot of different ways to be in right relation with local Native American tribes and the lands that we're on today. If you'd like to learn more about the work that Together Bay Area is doing, I encourage you to check out both our Right Relations program and the program from our 2024 conference, which the links to both of those will show up in the chat in just a minute. Because we're trying to go beyond land acknowledgements and acknowledge land that we're on, but also do more. And so I invite you to learn more about what we're doing and for you to do more than land acknowledgements also. We're here today to learn and get inspired. And I want to tell you just quickly about Together Bay Area. We're a regional coalition of organizations working together for healthy lands, healthy people, and healthy communities. And I see in the chat, in the participants, that there's a lot of people here today that work for Together Bay Area members. Hi, really glad that you're here. One of the things that we're working on as a coalition is advocating for significant and stable funding for the region. And that takes us to Proposition 4. Proposition 4 is a bond measure that is on our ballots. Mail in if we have those, or will be on the ballot that we see in person on November 5th. It's a bond measure that is a $10 billion climate bond that tackles our most urgent climate needs today before the damage becomes too costly. Prop 4 includes about $1 billion, almost $1 billion for the State Coastal Conservancy, which is a really critical partner for many Together Bay Area members and many other local organizations. If you drive in any direction in the Bay Area for about 30 minutes, my guess is that you'll see some kind of landscape project, park restoration project that the State Coastal Conservancy has been involved in. This place, the Bay Area, has really been hugely impacted by the work of the State Coastal Conservancy. So we're personally, as a coalition, really excited to see the work, the funding that they have in Prop 4. And if it's passed, Prop 4 would make a big difference here in the Bay Area, from dealing with extreme heat, something that we're very familiar with the recent heat wave, to catastrophic wildfires, also something that we're very familiar with in the region. Clean drinking water for all Californians, and so much more. There's a lot that will happen on the ground in the Bay Area if Prop 4 passes. So today we're going to showcase some projects that some of our members are doing and can do if Prop 4 is successful, to help bring Prop 4 to life for you. I'm curious, since mail-in ballots have been sent and they should be in our mailboxes, or we've all received them. If you've already voted, I wonder if you could type voted in the chat just to get a sense of how many people have already made that, taken that step. If you have, great. And if you haven't, we're going to encourage you to vote yes on Prop 4. But it's also, today's a great opportunity for you all to learn more about Prop 4 and what it means. It's also a great opportunity to learn about some really cool, exciting projects, which I find really inspirational. It's also a great opportunity to learn about Prop 4 so that you can tell your friends and family, your neighbors and colleagues about it. So lots of good reasons to be here today, and I'm really glad that you're here. So sit back, enjoy a showcase of solutions. I encourage you to listen, take notes, and ask questions. You can ask questions in the chat. We will have time at the end of the presentations for a Q&A. So we will take your questions, write them down, and we'll address them towards the end, as many as we can, given the time that we have. And we really love to hear what questions you have. So shall we get started? I'm really excited to introduce our first speakers for today. We're going to travel down into the Santa Cruz Mountains. And our first speakers are Irina Kogan and Dylan Skybrook. Irina is the Director of Landscape Conservation at the Peninsula Open Space Trust, or POST. And Dylan is the manager of the Santa Cruz Mountains Stewardship Network. And they're going to bring us to the Santa Cruz Mountains to talk about climate resilience. And welcome them to the stage. Dylan, Irina.
Thank you, Annie. Yes, so we're happy to be here with you this afternoon to talk about our work on climate resilience in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Next slide, please. And so just to orient you with what do we mean by the Santa Cruz Mountains, so here is a map, and you can see it's the San Francisco Peninsula. The Santa Cruz Mountains span portions of San Mateo, Santa Cruz, and Santa Clara counties. And it's an area that's about 700,000 acres. Next slide. Our region in 2020 experienced the CZU lightning complex fire that burned about 86,000 acres of core redwood habitat. So in addition to the hundreds of thousands of acres that are in need of forest management, because we have excess vegetation in our forests, the area of the burn, the combination of deadwood and new growth, actually increased the vulnerability of this post-burn area to another catastrophic wildfire. Next slide. Thank you. So here are some images of what we mean by excess forest vegetation, or, the jargony term is biomass. For our region. So the top pictures are in a forest that hasn't burned in decades. The bottom picture is a picture of a forest that experienced a high intensity burn in the CZU complex fire. And so if you look at the picture at the top left, that's really our typical forest condition. You see there's a couple of big trees there, but there's a lot of spindly trees. There's a lot of vegetation on the ground, dead material, dead branches, and just vegetative material, or this excess material. Also, the trees have their lower limbs. And so you can see how in this area of the picture on the left, if there's a fire in this forest, there's so much fuel. And it's also very easy for the fire to climb from the ground up into the canopy. So that is a picture of a forest that's very vulnerable to catastrophic wildfire. One of the management tools that we use throughout our region, throughout California, actually it's used throughout the world, are creation of these very strategically placed shaded fuel breaks. So this is not a way to treat the entire forest, but in very strategic areas. And what you can see is that in the shaded fuel break, The vegetation on the ground has been removed. Also, some of the lower limbs have been trimmed. And so if a fire enters this area, you can see that there's very little fuel for this fire, and that will hopefully slow down the fire, also keep it from climbing up into the canopy. Now, to do this, we need to remove the vegetation, this excess vegetation. And if you think about doing it at a regional scale or a state scale, that is a lot of vegetation that then gets removed that we need to do something with. And so if you look at the picture at the bottom, it's very natural to think once a fire has passed through, that actually we're in less danger of another catastrophic fire. But the reality is that once a fire moves through, you have standing dead trees that are very susceptible to fire. We also have a lot of downed logs that are dry and susceptible. And also we have this vigorous, thick regrowth that again is also susceptible to fire. So so managing all this and managing it on a regional scale requires a lot of funding, and it also requires a productive use for the vegetative material. Next slide, please. And our current options for dealing with this vegetative material is, well, one, you can pile it and you can burn it. You can also chip it and scatter the chips. But again, it's one thing to do it on a small property scale, but imagine doing it for the region. How many pile burns, how many chips, the amount of chips we would produce. There's also options of we can incinerate it. We can also transport it out of the region. But if we're trying to transport it out of the region, where does it go? Because again, so many of the regions are dealing with the same issue. Next slide, please. And so this is what we've termed the biomass problem. We have a lot of material that must be removed from our forest in order to create fire resilience and climate resilience for our region. This costs a lot. Wouldn't it be great to have a productive use, maybe even a use that could even generate some funds that could then be put back into treating these forests? But in the Santa Cruz Mountains, we only have one tree species, and that's redwoods, that actually has a local market. But our fire resilience projects produce large amounts of wood that don't have local markets. And so in addition to the cost, there are also other barriers for slowing the progress of this critical work. Next slide, please. And so to give you a sense for the scale of the cost, as well as just the amount of biomass that's produced, wanted to share with you an example of San Vicente Redwoods. This is a property that is co-owned by Post and Sempervirens Fund, and it is also then co-managed with the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County and Save the Redwoods League. And we are very active in managing our property. And just in this year alone, we have treated 129 acres, and that treating the 129 acres has cost about $1.25 million. Those are grant funded from CAL FIRE and the Coastal Conservancy. And so again, think about 129 acres versus our region, hundreds of thousands of acres, and the work that's needed. So the $1.25 million went into creating a forest road fuel break along just a 1.5 mile stretch. We have many more miles to go. And also removing some hazard trees to keep those roads safe, to keep also access safe for the public who's using these properties. And in that stretch, plus the removing the hazardous trees, we produced a lot of biomass. And the way we dealt with it on this property by property basis, which is the way the work is done now, is that we consumed 4,000 tons of vegetation essentially incinerated it. And then we created over 1,000 burn piles. And so again, think about that. That's only 129 acres and literally over 1,000 burn piles and then 4,000 tons of material at a cost of 1.25 million. And so that, as we think about doing this on a region, statewide, larger scales, these are some of the issues that we're tackling. Next slide, please, and I'll turn it over to Dylan.
Thanks, Irina. Yeah, so if we have this giant challenge, we really need a climate smart, ecologically beneficial, and financially sustainable regional solution to the challenge. Next slide. And if we're going to do this at a regional scale, that's where we're turning to the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network, which is a vehicle for folks to work collaboratively across the region. The network has 25 organizations that own or manage or in some way steward land in the region. A while back, we formed a biomass team because everyone was dealing with this challenge. And one of the things we realized is that everyone was experiencing this challenge in different ways. You know, if you think back to Irina's slide about the different things that you can do, people were having different challenges if they were chipping it or if they were doing burn piles. They were having permitting challenges depending on where they were in the region because they're in different air board districts. And so we felt what we really needed is a big picture to understand what's happening in the entire region. What are the different opportunities that we might have? What are the different barriers? And how can we look at that all together? Next slide, please. So the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network and Post got together and conceived of a project that would create this big picture, see the pathways, the strategies, the challenges, all in one picture together. And so that's what we're doing now. We're trying to look at how much feedstock is available, meaning how many trees and so on, in case we wanted to do something like an energy plant. And we're looking at preliminary siting of things like energy plants. All that together will help individual organizations make choices, but we'll also see possibly collaborative strategies that would be visible if we see this big picture, where it's not if we're just working at a property by property scale. Once we're able to identify the most promising strategies, then we can do another phase of the work and figure out how to move forward with that. And something like Prop 4 might be able to help us do that really critical work to make sure that the region is climate resilient. And as Irina said, we're not the only region dealing with this. So figuring out how to do this kind of work regionally, collaboratively is super important. Next slide, please. So that's what we have for you today. We're really excited to tell you about this work because we think it's really important. It's been great to work with Post on this. Thanks to Together Bay Area for arranging this session and for all the other fantastic work that you do. And we'll be answering questions a little bit later in the session.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Irina. I'm really struck by how much thinking and strategy and the complicated work that is required to take care of forests. Like there's a lot of science, but there's also, as you highlighted, a lot of logistics. What do you actually do with stuff that is created or that needs to be moved onto the site or removed from the site? So thank you for illuminating some pretty complicated stuff in a way that I, for one, can understand, not being a scientist or a public land management manager. So thank you very much. And for those of us who aren't in the business, or even if you are, I recommend going to visit San Vicente Redwoods also. It's a beautiful place to visit. The intentionality and care that the organizations who are involved have put into that place is pretty exceptional. So here's a plug for a trip this coming weekend or sometime soon to go to see San Vicente for yourself. So thank you very much, Irina and Dylan. We're going to move from San Vicente Redwoods to the Bay Area Ridge Trail. If you have walked some of or all, I wonder if there's any circumnavigators here in the room, of the Ridge Trail, I'd love to see your comment in the chat. And I'm really excited to welcome Ryan Fritz to the stage to talk about some of the things that he and the Ridge Trail is working on. Ryan is the trail project manager for the Bay Area Ridge Trail Council. And one fun fact is that he's walked the Appalachian Trail, so which means that I think he's exceptionally qualified to work on the Bay Area Ridge Trail, which is a similar long distance trail. So with that, I welcome Ryan to talk about the Ridge Trail.
Hey everyone, thank you Annie for the introduction and Together Bay Area for having me here today. I wanted to start with a quick little exercise. It's simple. I just want all of you here today to think about the last trail you were on, or maybe just a trail that was special to you from recently or from growing up, and just hold that picture of the trail in your mind. And if you want to go to the next slide. You were maybe picturing green rolling hills or the redwood forests. If you go to the next slide. Maybe it was something different, more like rocky ridgelines like we have at Mayan Oyakma in Santa Clara County. You can go to the next slide. Or maybe it was just an urban or neighborhood park with a bike path. Or maybe it was something totally different. If you want to go to the next slide. Those 3 examples of trails that we just talked about, the question I have for you all is, what do these trails have in common? And if you said they're trails in beautiful open spaces, you'd be correct. But these trails are also all along the Bay Area Ridge Trail. And I'm excited to talk about the Ridge Trail and some exciting projects we have. But I think the biggest takeaway I want everyone to walk away with is that the trails we know and love take a lot of love and a lot of work to plan, build, and maintain. And if you want to go to the next slide, for the Bay Area Ridge Trail, what you're looking at on the right is a map of the whole Ridge Trail network, where we have open dedicated trail in red and the conceptual plan trail in blue. And the Ridge Trail is a long distance trail with a vision to connect up to 550 miles in a loop around the San Francisco Bay, connecting parks, people, and open spaces for today and for future generations. And over 35 years of work, we've opened up over 400 miles that you can go out and explore, mostly open to hiking, biking, and equestrian use. We connect over 75 different parks and open spaces, and we do all of that super collaboratively with over 35 park partners across all 9 counties. Next slide, please. The work we do at the Ridge Trail Council as a small nonprofit really falls into 3 buckets. On the left, we have action, where we're trying to first and foremost complete the Ridge Trail, make it a true through hike experience. To do that, that also involves conducting route studies and analyzing how can we get from A to B through some complicated terrain. And then under action, we also get to host stewardship projects where we have volunteers out to actually maintain the trails, give them some love, you know, cutting back weeds, fixing drainages, including our biggest service day coming up on November 2nd. And then in the middle, we really do a lot of advocacy for our trails and open spaces, building public support. We do a lot of partnerships with the land trusts and park agencies, like Post, like Midpen, like a lot of other South Bay agencies. And of course, we advocate for funding because it does take funding to make these projects happen. And then on the right, probably my favorite, is the adventure side of the Ridge Trail Council. We try to get people outdoors. We guide treks and overnight outings throughout the year. We host VIT outings, or very important trails. Those are typically on restricted access properties where they might not be totally open to public access yet, but we enjoy getting people out there to see kind of a sneak peek of what's coming. And we also try to offer tools and resources like online maps to help people find their next hike or bike or horseback ride. You can go to the next slide, please. Getting into specifics on the trail projects, you can go one more slide, please. I mentioned a lot of the work is trail planning and route studies. So in the South Bay, picture on the left was a site visit with Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. They had acquired a new property to expand one of their popular parks, Rancho Cañada del Oro. And they're going through the long process of planning the trails and the natural resources considerations to turn this new acquisition into a functioning park. And so we had the privilege of going out there, pointing off in the distance, looking at the ridge lines, and seeing what route opportunities there could be, combined with all the other environmental considerations that go into making a new park. In the middle, you can see a map that we worked on to help secure funding and also to identify some of the neighboring parks. And then on the right, there's another example. There was a large property acquisition, the Richmond Ranch, east of San Jose, which will hopefully connect two existing sections of Ridge Trail. But it's just a long 5 to 10 year or more process to go through all the necessary planning to get that to a state where it can be open to public access and enjoyed by everyone. Go to the next slide, please. Another specific example of the work we do at the Ridge Trail Council focuses on the Southern Loop Working Group. So what we're looking at is an online map that the Ridge Trail Council created to actually collaborate on some acquisition opportunities and trail planning opportunities in southern Santa Clara County. And all those different colored polygons represent open spaces that are managed by different agencies. So it's such a mosaic of colors. You have Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District, Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority, county parks, etc. And the Ridge Trail is kind of this thread that weaves through all of these jurisdictional boundaries. And so we thought it made a lot of sense to bring those groups together and share our knowledge, share our skills, our experiences, and collaborate on this long distance trail that kind of links them. And so this Southern Loop Working Group has been just a great opportunity to collaborate and learn from different agencies. And if you want to go one more slide, please. And one of the best parts is getting to the trail openings and ribbon cuttings. It's kind of the culmination of all of these years of hard work when we actually get to cut the ribbon, open new trail, invite folks out to celebrate it. So on the left, we have an opening at Mino Yakima Coyote Ridge, which just opened east of San Jose. And then on the right was another recent dedication up in Solano County. But we do have a couple dedications coming in the next year in the South Bay that we're really excited about. We'll be sharing more information on those, but just such a great opportunity to bring communities together and celebrate the accomplishments and open these parks. You want to go one more slide and then one more. And just a couple resources to get out on the trail. I mentioned we have resources on our website, interactive maps, tools, all trails to help get you out there. And if you can go one more slide. That's kind of the highlight. A lot of folks ask how we can help. And I think certainly check out our website, check out our newsletter. But most importantly is just about getting out and enjoying the trail and sharing it with others, spreading the word. That's really the best thing you can do. Yeah, happy to take questions later on, but thank you all. That's it.
Thank you, Ryan. That is fantastic. Thank you for inspiring us. I don't know about everyone else, but I'd really like to go hiking right about now instead of looking at a computer. So thank you so much for sharing about the work of the Ridge Trail. One thing that your presentation reminded me of is how regional trails like the Ridge Trail, the Bay Trail, and others have been catalyst for land conservation for all kinds of different reasons, not just for the trail itself, but all of the multiple benefits around the trail that can happen. And that the Ridge Trail has been, you're celebrating 30 years, 25 years?
35.
35 years. And so has really played a critical role in what the Bay Area looks like today from along the ridges. And I want to make sure that the Bay Trail gets its credit too, because it's been a key part for how the Bay Area looks and is the way that it is. So thank you so much for your work to help make that happen.
Of course,
thank you for sharing today. And let's all go hiking on the Ridge Trail. as soon as we can. I also think that there's the Ridge Trail is another way of understanding the complexities of how trails are built, and how you sync together over 400 miles of trail around 10 counties is a really big undertaking. And that from an individual perspective, we can go out and enjoy a trail in the different modes, from hiking, running, biking, horseback, that we can really have a very personal, embodied experience, as well as an intellectual one, to understand how complicated it is to do this work. So hats off to the Ridge Trail Council. Next speaker is joining us from the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. Mid-Pen is one of the larger open space districts here in the Bay Area. And based on this photo, I think we're going to hear about some mountain lions. So we're going to shift from human transport, human travel, to wildlife travel. And I'm thrilled to welcome to the stage my friend and colleague, Josh Hugg, who's Government Affairs Program Manager at Mid-Pen, and one of the most knowledgeable people about how conservation works in the Bay Area. So welcome, Josh, to the stage.
Thanks, Annie. Yes, and you are correct. We are talking about mountain lions today. But really, mountain lions are just one of the many species served by this project that I'm going to talk about. This picture that you see here was taken by a trail camera placed in our Sierra Azul Preserve, which is in the southern portion of our district. Next slide, please. Oops, there you go. Not making any assumptions about the audience, I put in a quick background slide that just talks about what are wildlife corridors and what purpose do they serve. And an ideal situation is that you have large habitat blocks for animals to roam around and to sustain themselves. But when they become fragmented, you rely on these wildlife corridors to connect them. And they serve a number of purposes, certainly for breeding purposes, to maintain genetic diversity, juvenile dispersal as wildlife, particularly predators, get older. They need to find their own territories. And then finally, sign of the times, movement to more hospitable areas as climate conditions change. And the slide, or the picture on the right there, shows is an indicator of climactic water deficit. This is a study that was performed in partnership with the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network to take a forward look at the Santa Cruz Mountains and understand how climate change is going to manifest itself on the peninsula. And I guess it came as no surprise that there's going to be more stressors on plants and soils going forward, and that certainly affects local habitats, and animals need to adapt. So the necessity for these corridors increase over time. And the next slide. This is a map of what's called critical linkages. This is the study, the cover sheet you see in the corner there is actually a product of the Bay Area Open Space Council, or an effort catalyzed by the Bay Area Open Space Council, I'll say, through their Conservation Lands Network. And I think Tom is online representing that. And there was a systematic study done in the mid-2000s that looked at a variety of focal species and the areas in the Bay Area that help to facilitate movement of those species around the Bay Area. And this is zoomed in on the South Bay, and you can see the orange area, which is one of our local critical linkages on and off the San Francisco Peninsula. And then you see in yellow those large land blocks, which provide the the local habitat. And the larger and more contiguous they are, the better those species are served. And then finally, the star there is our project area that I'll be talking about. If you go to the next slide. So no major undertaking or major undertakings don't occur without data. So in the 2012-ish period, MidPen worked with two organizations, Pathways for Wildlife and the University of California, Santa Cruz Puma Project, Chris Wilmer, to understand wildlife vehicle collisions along Highway 17, particularly because it transects that critical linkage that we saw on the previous slide. And what you see here is is the survey data that came out of that work and really provided the impetus for both our project and also our sister project on the western slope, conducted by the Land Trust of Santa Cruz, which is actually done and is working, and beautiful pictures of wildlife crossing underneath Highway 17. Well, a similar effort is needed on our side of the Santa Cruz Mountains, and this data helps to support that. So if you go to the next slide, please. So a little further on in the chronology, in 2012, MidPen reached out to the constituents within its district to understand what should the district be focused on over the next 30 years. And the result of that was a vision plan that identified 25 what we called portfolios, priority project portfolios, for things that we should be working on: trails, land acquisitions, a host of other items. The top of the list was the wildlife crossing project. And actually, I should back up a little bit and say that this wildlife crossing project is not just that. It's actually two projects in one that have been moving largely in lockstep. We have a wildlife crossing, and we have a crossing of Highway 17 for pedestrians that also serves as a linkage for the Bay Area Ridge Trail. And Ryan talked about that extensively, and this co-project will be hopefully linking, I believe it's 50 miles of Ridge Trail with its completion. And so with the completion of that vision plan, our board determined that a ballot measure was needed to fund those priority projects. Not fund them entirely, but provide particularly the early money needed to get these projects off the ground. And in 2014, we went to the voters with Measure AA, and that was a $300 million general obligation bond. And with the help of our partners like Post and Green Foothills, that passed with a 2/3 majority, and it really served to catalyze these projects. Next slide, please. So what you see here is a area. I'm not sure if it's a drone view or a view from a very high place of the project area. You saw earlier the map showing all of the roadkill along a stretch of Highway 17. This is that stretch, and what you'll see here are a couple of things. One is the Trout Creek. As it comes down the mountainside, it hangs a left and then runs into Highway 17. The culvert that you see in the lower left corner is the continuation of Trout Creek across Highway 17. And as you can see, a deer standing there, all they see is darkness. This culvert was not created with wildlife in mind. So this project is designed to remedy that. what you'll see on the left there is also Lexington Reservoir that also serves as a barrier from the movement of wildlife. So it really does channel wildlife into this very specific stretch of Highway 17. Next slide, please. So what you see here is an overview of the project area. You can see the trail connections and some of the proposed alignments that go with it. Recently, our board selected preferred alternatives both for the trail and for the crossing. So it will be a pedestrian overcrossing for the hikers and an undercrossing for wildlife. And what you can see, the important feature here is that it's a wide crossing structure that wildlife can see underneath, or see through to the other side, rather. If you go to the next slide, this is another illustration of what this will look like, and that this will facilitate dispersal of wildlife as they cross through, both onto and off of the San Francisco Peninsula. And something I should have mentioned a few slides ago with the critical linkages is that this also facilitates the movement of wildlife between mountain ranges. And this is one thing this is a really important point, is that, these habitats and this crossing does not work in isolation. We have partner projects that are facilitating the movement of wildlife across Coyote Valley into the Diablo Range, and then south across the Pajaro Valley into the Gavilan Range. And the Land Trust of Santa Cruz is a big partner in that effort, as is Post. So this is a rendering of what this crossing will look like. And what you see in the lower left corner is that is supplemented with the addition of what they call directional fencing. So wildlife will hit the fence and pick a direction, and hopefully will be heading towards the crossing. But what they won't be doing is running into traffic like they normally like they've done in the past. Next slide, please. So what we have here is just a chronology of the project, where we started with those feasibility studies that we saw earlier, and then all the way up to today, where we are just completing the environmental reviews. Caltrans has signed off on NEPA, and eventually we will be handing this project over officially to the Valley Transportation Authority, VTA. They are our project delivery partner. And if we are successful in raising enough funds, there's a fairly large gap, and I guess that's one reason why we're here today. We would be targeting groundbreaking in 2027, and I guess about a year or two after that, we'll have a completed wildlife crossing. What you see at the bottom here illustrates that projects like these do not. No organization is an island. We all rely on the support of others, and these are our key partners to make this project happen. It's a long list, and it's probably even longer than this. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to put in a quick plug for a second project, just to quickly talk about this. Right around the corner in the upper right, in the upper left corner of the picture is our Highway 17 crossing project. But right down the road, we have what some call a newt-pocalypse occurring, with newts coming down the mountainside every winter to cross Alma Bridge Road to go into the reservoir to breed. And we are seeing massive mortalities by cars driving up and down that road. A community science project really catalyzed this effort, and we are now on board, and we're working with the county. This is a county road, to help them deliver this crossing project. And definitely keep an ear out for more updates about the progress on this project. And with that, I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Josh. And thank you for introducing a new word into our vocabulary of the newt apocalypse. if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But thank you so much for sharing the work that you and your colleagues are doing. It's a really huge undertaking. And I'm so excited for the day when we get to see those wildlife crossings, both above and below, for the wildlife and for the people, to make it safer. So thank you so much for sharing. As we wrap up and summarize some of the things that we've heard today, we've talked a lot about connectivity, both of trails for people. Maybe we don't call them trails, but trails for wildlife also. The connectivity between different kinds of lands and needing to connect them to one another for the health and safety of wildlife and humans alike. We've also heard a lot about partnerships. I hope everyone listening and watching takes away the idea that none of this happens in isolation, that each organization is working together in a lot of different ways, on a constant basis, on a micro scale as well as a macro scale, to create these really exciting projects. And I also hope that folks are taking away that this is a long time. These projects take a long time to do, and they take a lot of money. And that money is really critical for the success of the project, for the partnerships, for the science and the research and everything that goes into it. So there's a lot to take away from today's speakers, and also a lot of inspiration. I can't wait to go outside and see some of these places firsthand. So thank you all to all of our speakers. As I said, all of this takes a lot of money, and that's where Prop 4 can come in and make a big difference. It certainly isn't the only money that's needed. It certainly isn't enough money for, well, definitely not for this region, and it's a statewide measure not for the state, but it's a really important down payment on some of the work that we need to do for a more climate resilient California. And it's going to take ongoing funding, not just from Prop 4, but from local sources, as some of the speakers talked about, as well as additional state investments. So Prop 4 is a really important thing to pass this fall, and it would make some of the projects that we've heard from today possible, as well as many, many others. So now we're going to open it up to hear from our speakers, where I'll open up to questions. And I'm going to start with some, but I see that there are some questions in the chat. So as folks are coming back up onto this virtual stage, I'm going to start with a question for you all. You've talked a lot about the complexities of your work, and there are people here today who go out onto these trails or can see these vistas from where they live or work or hike, or however they're outside. What would you like folks to know about the work that's involved, like the behind the scenes? If you could share one thing about how it is to put together these projects in these places, what's something that you'd like for folks to know about? And why don't we start with you, Irina, and then others can jump in as they feel like it.
I think it's a theme it's a great question. It's a theme we've hit on, is the collaboration and how thoughtful the work is. Mm-hmm. And I think also the complexity of the work. It's the coming up with figuring out the science of the projects that are done, thinking through the impacts, right, of the work that's done. Then thinking about ways it could be funded and trying to figure out the funding piece. That's huge. Also the regulatory piece that we work in, figuring that. And then also having skilled people to be able to do the work. And that is also a challenge in our region, is having the skilled workforce that is expert in doing this kind of work. So it takes all of those pieces coming together in order to have a project. So it's really complex and it's really cool. And there's a lot of celebration when we are able to accomplish these projects.
Really well said. Anyone else like to jump in about what you'd like the general public to know about and about the work that you do?
One thing I'd love for folks to know is that it's really easy to go out and walk through the forest and be like, ah, nature. But a lot of the landscapes we walk in are not the way they were sort of naturally prior to colonization. And so when you're out there walking through a trail, it's the product of a lot of people that you know, kind of Irina was just gesturing toward, that are grappling with so many issues, trying to help the ecosystems move back into healthy functioning, trying to figure out how human beings are going to interact with those ecosystems. And it just takes a lot of work, a lot of people being very thoughtful doing that work. So I hope you all just appreciate all those folks who are going out to do that work and figure out the alignment of the trails and all that kind of thing.
Indeed. Thank you, Dylan.
The trails are hard work, physically for sure. Anyone who's like swung a McLeod or volunteered on work day knows that, but also what everyone else was saying about the planning and review and just the conscious effort it takes to make it look natural. It takes time and work for sure.
Really good point.
Yeah,
Josh?
I'll certainly, you know, second and third the comments made earlier, particularly, you know, the devil's in the details. But I think it's also important to talk about, and Annie, I think you mentioned it briefly, was that you know, protecting land is just the start. There's the ongoing stewardship, and we're, in many ways, a lot of our projects are about just repairing historic damage. But looking forward, particularly in the face of climate change, there's going to be a lot of adaptation that needs to occur. And that doesn't happen automatically. Unfortunately, and we know this, you know, the people who lived here for tens of thousands of years prior to our arrival managed these landscapes. Species evolved to that. We have a lot of fire-dependent, fire-adapted species. And we have to repair a lot of the damage that has occurred because of the way that we've treated the land. But now with climate change, we know that we are going to have to take an active hand in this. And these complex projects are just a taste of what's going to be, what we will be facing in the future. So this will be an ongoing process and need ongoing funding to support that.
Really good point, Josh. And I'm going to use that as a segue into our last question for, I think, let's see how timing is. One of the questions from the audience is, could you speak to what you hope Prop 4 will do? What are you excited about for Prop 4 and what it means to the work that you do? Ryan, do you want to start this time?
Yeah, happy to. I see Prop 4 helping us solve our most complex gaps in the Ridge Trail. Opportunities like the Highway 17 crossing with Midpin are just something that without immense support could take decades and decades to accomplish. So Prop 4 is about getting our stuck gaps more unstuck.
That could be the campaign logo. Unstucking projects that are stuck.
There's something there. Yeah.
There's something there. Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Others want to jump in? What are you excited about?
Okay. Climate resilience is the challenge of our time. So a bond that is targeted to address climate resilience is exactly what we need in order for the funding to do these critical projects. We know what we need to do. We can't do anything without money. So that's what I'm really excited about, is that it will propel us into the future, that like, what can we be doing in our time? And these are the projects we can be doing in our time. And Prop 4 can help us get there.
Really well said. Awesome.
If I can just piggyback on that, one thing that's actually kind of cool sometimes about having a problem is that you can also do several solutions. So being able to help our forests be more climate resilient we can also do work to help them be more healthy generally. So Prop 4 is going to help us move toward climate resilient forests, but also just overall forest health. And so I think that's a really positive thing about that.
Great point. None of these things that you've talked about today and others in the previous Showcase Solutions events have been like one thing. It's not just about building a trail or about one species or one place. They're really multi-benefit in lots of different ways. So really good point. Josh, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I guess two things. I guess one, bonds like these are, it's part of the ounce of prevention, because given the climate challenges that we faced in the past and will continue to face in the future, the more work you can do up front will help to, help both communities and habitats weather those changes in the future. Catastrophic wildfires, being, so present on the landscape over the last, 5 or 6 years. That's just, one example. And then, for those of you who, get into the vagaries of the state budget process, it's very extreme up and extreme down. A couple of years ago, we had an extremely good budget. And then now it's extremely bad. Bonds like this serve as a bridge until, things start to turn around, and, there's every indication right now that things are starting to turn around. So this will definitely help until that time.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. And thank you, all of you, for speaking and sharing your projects today. Everyone, please join me in thanking Ryan, Irina, Dylan, and Josh for their time and expertise, and for sharing their stories with us today. I'm not sure if this works exactly math-wise, but I think the climate bond being a $10 billion ounce of prevention is another potential tagline for this proposition. It really is an important investment that we need to make as a state, as a region, to build climate resilience and use nature-based and equity-centered solutions to our climate crisis. So thank you all for joining us today. And if you'd like to learn more information about Proposition 4, we'd be happy to share it with you. And if you're interested in learning more about these great folks and their work, we'd be happy to connect you. So please reach out. And with that, I wish you all a great rest of your Tuesday afternoon. And thank you so much for joining us. And please vote yes on Prop 4. Take care.